Very early in life, we learn that we are a social being. That is, life for the human being has the need of dependency upon other human beings for his or her well-being, basic subsistence, security, and worthiness. That basic need of dependence upon others is what brings human existence into reality. It is through relationships of all kinds that bring forth love and hate, joy and bitterness, happiness and sorrow, and compassion and rejection. If we were not a social animal, so to speak, these emotions would be difficult at best to experience as an expression of life. Although many of the positive emotions are grounded in love, they present different emotional experiences. This is most certainly true with compassion. One interesting definition of compassion is that which I found in Wikipedia, which says, quote, "Compassion is a profound human emotion prompted by the pain of others. More rigorous than empathy, the feeling commonly gives rise to an active desire to alleviate another's sufferings." End of quote. Passion is one of the fundamental elements of Buddhism and is defined in that religion in this way. Quote, "Compassion is that which makes the heart of the good move at the pain of others. It crushes and destroys the pain of others. Thus, it is called compassion. It is called compassion because it shelters and embraces the distressed." End of quote. When we are confronted with the news of people who are victims of the disasters in life, often our inclination is to first to have empathy. That is, we feel for them. But many take the next step and move on to compassion by saying, "What can I do to help?" This outpouring of help shows that mankind is a social being, since we need not think twice in offering assistance, even though these people may never have physically touched our lives or we never personally knew them. But we share their distress since they are human, like us. We place ourselves in their shoes, and this leads us to compassion and the giving of our assistance. In experiencing the pandemic, compassion is evident with those wearing masks in order to keep the virus from the possibility of spreading to others. Human compassion can and does carry over into all of life. We have the capacity and the propensity to act out of compassion to the animal kingdom and all of God's living creation. It is very sad, a very sad, miserable, and pitiful creature which cannot have any compassion for a world of living creatures which share this creation with us. To ignore compassion is to begin to deny our humanity and miss the joy of life. The Dalai Lama has said, if you want others to be happy, practice compassion. One of the most interesting observations about compassion was from George Washington Carver. Quote, "How far you go in life depends on your being tender with the young, compassionate with the aged, sympathetic with the striving, and tolerant of the weak and strong. Because someday in life, you will have been all of these. End of quote. Today's gospel lesson is the well-known story about Jesus and the feeding of the 5,000. It so happens to be one of the most compelling examples of compassion. After spending much time teaching and ministering in the region of Galilee, Jesus returned to his hometown of Nazareth. He appeared to have had a very successful mission in all the region. But in his hometown, he was greeted with skepticism and even rejection. This led Jesus to remark, "No prophet is accepted in his own hometown." End of quote. If this rejection was not enough to bear, Jesus received the news that John the Baptist, who was such a vital part of his life, was beheaded by Herod. With all the wear and tear on his human form, from his journeys and his rejection in his own hometown, the news of John the Baptist was the straw that broke the camel's back. He just had to get away, escape from all of it, and to be by himself. He needed time to himself in order to recuperate from it all. Therefore, he asked his disciples to take him across the Sea of Galilee to where there was more isolated territory. There he could withdraw to the privacy of a deserted place. Now, during the voyage across the Sea of Galilee, the longing for that retreat must have consumed his being. But it was not to be, since his popularity in Galilee would not allow him to be alone. The word spread rapidly that Jesus was on the move again and that he was traveling to the other side of the lake. In great numbers, they took the land route around the lake, so that when Jesus landed, there was already a large crowd to greet him. Now, with all the burdens he was carrying, it would have been very normal and understandable for him to be agitated and demand that his disciples try to help him to escape the crowd. But he didn't. Instead, we are told he set aside his personal needs for the rest of the day in order to tend to the needs of the people by curing their sick. The crowd had no idea of what Jesus was personally going through. They had no idea of the personal sacrifice he was making for them. This was the greatest of compassion, for it was made out of sacrifice. The story becomes even more illustrative in that he not only had compassion for those who were suffering from sickness, but he had compassion for their everyday human needs. He was reminded of this by his disciples. When they approached him, they said, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is now late. Send the crowds away so they may go into the villages and buy food for themselves." With this, Jesus replied. His reply was, "Don't send them away hungry and in search of food. Feed them. Well, you know the story. The disciples only had 5 loaves and 2 fish to share. This, of course, was a drop in the bucket as to what would be required to feed such a large gathering. Jesus ignored this reality. He had the people sit down, and he blessed what they had and gave it to the disciples to distribute. It seems that Jesus' compassion was totally beyond any kind of reality. But what happened defied reality, for they all ate with much food left over. Did Jesus perform the miracle of multiplying the food many times over? It is thought that this is what happened, since nothing is beyond God's capability. And on the other hand, it may be interesting to note that there could be another kind of miracle involved. Did Jesus' compassion wear off onto the people? Did they learn the lesson of compassion? It must be noted that people making such a journey would have normally carried food and with them, since there were no restaurants or McDonald's, so to speak. So there was food among them. They were also had the human tendency, though, to hoard what they had for themselves. In sharing what he had, the 5 loaves and 2 fishes, he then placed the burden, or rather joy, upon the rest to do the same. In fact, in doing this, he called upon the human capacity, the compassion of the people to get beyond their greed, to share what they had. Could it be that the great miracle performed that day was that this large crowd, who may have normally been controlled by greed, suddenly experienced compassion for each other, and shared what they had with each other? Regardless, Jesus brings the reality of compassion to life so that we may fulfill the best of human nature within our lives, so that others may find life. This great miracle is one in which we can all participate, for it is basic to humanity, only deterred by greed and ego. Compassion is to let God's love become active in our lives so that others may find relief in times of despair and crisis. This is when we find true happiness and find the joy of being a child of God. Compassion. Compassion is what will lead us through this crisis of today. Amen.